First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
And hello, everyone. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. As always, appreciate you joining us live here. We're live on the Fox 12 Oregon apps. We're on the website. We're on our social media channels, so lots of ways to find us. So if you're on one of those right now, you want to join the other one, you can always do that whenever it is that we are here. And we cover a lot of topics on this show. I always want to bring that up to everybody because we do have a wide range of things that we do cover. But today we're talking about, well, we're rolling into fall, whether you want to or not. And hunting season, though, is starting back up. And with that comes a new campaign from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to protect Oregon's wildlife. And we're talking about poachers. Poaching is a huge concern, whether you know it or not. We're going to go through that to teach you a little bit more about that in case you didn't know. And there are new campaigns now to turn in poachers. There's a lot happening with this, and the ODFW is really behind a lot of these initiatives to do that. And right now I'm joined by Yvonne Shaw to talk about these campaigns and talk about, really everything surrounding poaching and just why it's such a concern for everybody here in Oregon and the Northwest. But to start off, maybe you can give everybody just a little bit of an overview of hunting season as we're rolling into this and just where we're at right now.
Sure, we are rolling into hunting season, and I know a lot of your viewers are very interested in that. As a resource, I'll point out the weekly rec report, which is where they can find updates on ODFW hunting and fishing opportunities. And it's very timely that we're talking about this Turn In Poachers campaign because nobody is more concerned about turning in poachers than hunters and anglers.
Yeah, and that's something that really I feel like is a very important point on there too, because I guess let's go to this. Let's talk about the poaching side of things. Like what are the big concerns in Oregon when it comes to poaching?
Sure. The big concerns, well, there are several. One of them is that most poaching goes undetected. So these are crimes against fish and wildlife that happen out in rural areas. In the dark of night, often they're undetected. And another challenge to this, effort is that people don't know how to report poaching when they do see it. And we rely on the public for some of that reporting.
And I think both of those are very important things to go into too. I think before we even do that though, for the poaching itself, the crime of taking some of this wildlife, fish and wildlife that's out there, what are the damages that are caused by someone poaching?
Sure. So this impacts all of our ability to monitor fish and wildlife that are on the landscape, in our waterways, along the beaches. Poaching is the illegal killing or capture of any fish or wildlife, and that includes birds. And so when we're talking about poaching, really, we're talking about preserving our natural resources, fish, wildlife, birds, for future generations. And what we want to do with this campaign is help people to recognize poaching when they see it and then inform them on how to report it.
And you mentioned, that usually happens out in very rural areas, sometimes in the middle of the night. That's got to be very difficult to track and find when it does occur. Is it not?
Absolutely. Last year alone, there were about 5,000 animals that Oregon State Police Fish and Wildlife troopers discovered had been illegally killed. And we know that is just a fraction of it. So we ask people to be aware when they're out there camping and hiking and kayaking. And if they see something suspicious, they can be a good witness. Part of being a good witness means capturing something in a photo if they possibly can, paying attention to where they might have seen the discretion happen, the time of day, the exact date. And then if they have any descriptions of the vehicle or the person involved or the people involved, that's helpful as well.
So what are some things to look for people who are out there, and how do you identify between actual legal hunting versus poaching?
It can be difficult because there are a lot of legal, ethical, licensed hunters and anglers out there. So some of the things you might watch for is activity that just doesn't seem right. For instance, somebody cruising slowly along a road or somebody casting light out into a field. That's called spotlighting, and that's a way to mesmerize animals so that they won't move and they become easy targets. And then the obvious things, of course, if people come across animals or carcasses, that, of course, can be an indication. Legal, ethical hunters will take those carcasses, they'll use the meat. This is a way of life. It's very ethical, a very ethical harvest practice. But poachers often take only trophies. They might take the antlers, they might take the head, they might leave the entire animal. So if you see anything like that, please do call it in to the tip line.
So does that include even if you see something that you may confuse as possibly, being hit by a car, but you're not sure what it is? Should you report that as well?
All tips are good tips.
Okay.
So if you're not sure if a tip is poaching or not, you can always contact Oregon State Police Fish and Wildlife Division and report it. And if it is poaching, then that gives them a chance to possibly apprehend the people who committed the crime. If it's not poaching, then that gives them a chance to have a positive interaction with somebody who's out in the fields enjoying Oregon scenery.
And when it comes to that, if someone is out there, there's a lot of people that camp and hike that may not be hunters, as we're talking about. So they're out there in the wilderness and could have that opportunity to see something. So say that you do see somebody driving something as obvious as what you mentioned, driving slowly along the road, spotlighting. What are the steps that you should do if you encounter something like that?
Mhm. Well, first of all, make sure you're safe. And then you'll call the OSP tip line. So that from your mobile device is star OSP or star 677, or you can call the Turn-In Poachers line directly, which is 800-788-6888. Or you can go online to the Oregon State Police Fish and Wildlife website, and you can report through their website. And you can also find a link if you go to our brand new Protect Oregon's Wildlife Turn-In Poachers website. There's a button at the top that will allow you to report any suspicious activity that you see.
And this could be after the fact. Obviously, sometimes when you're up in the mountains, you may not have phone service, but should you do that when you get back into cell range?
Yes, take any pictures that you can. Go ahead and call that in when you get back into cell range. And even if it looks like it's been there for a while, you find something that might have been poaching, but you're not sure. Calling it in helps Oregon State Police Fish and Wildlife Troopers to know that there's a problem in that area if they determine that it has been an illegal kill. And it lets them increase their patrols, or it could even tie into another case they're already working on. So even if it seems benign or you're just not sure, like I said, there's no such thing as a bad tip. And along those lines, we were talking a little bit earlier about Oregon Hunters Association supporting this. So the Oregon Hunters Association started a reward for people who turn in poachers, and their report leads to a citation or an arrest. And so, for instance, if you turn in somebody who poached a deer, or you give a call that leads to the apprehension of that person, there's a $1,000 reward. And then a few years ago, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife augmented those rewards by offering hunter preference points, again, for a report that leads to a citation or an arrest. And then more recently, the Oregon Marine Board, the Oregon Outdoor Guide Association, and the Oregon Wildlife Coalition have started reward programs for those reports. So there are a lot of incentives. It's beyond just doing the right thing. There are also incentives for making these reports.
I mean, that's huge. Can you explain how the hunters points work?
Sure. Hunter preference points are for people who apply for tags every year. And anyone in your audience who hunts, and I imagine there are quite a few of them, you know all about this. The number of points that you have can increase your chances of drawing a tag in your unit of preference. So these points are in many cases more valuable than cash to people who are out hunting on our landscapes.
Which obviously, you know, like you mentioned, more incentives to catch these people who are doing this illegally and poaching the wildlife, the fish and wildlife. When it comes to poaching and you know, in Oregon, is there a specific animal that is poached more often than something else?
Unfortunately, Oregon is an equal opportunity poaching state, so everything is at risk. We have everything from, for instance, turtles that are taken out of ponds and then trafficked illegally through the pet trade. We have sturgeon, giant sturgeon that are taken. These are 80-year-old breeding stock sturgeon that are taken for their caviar. And of course, we have many deer and elk and other mammals that are taken. And we also have birds, raptors in particular, that people just, I hate to say this, but they just use them as target practice. And so these thrill kills really do impact our ability as Oregonians to enjoy our own natural resources.
Yeah, I want those people caught. So definitely, this is why this is good to be talking about this. So anything else? I guess for people out there. Well, you know what? Actually, here's another question. Talking about that, you know, these poachers who are caught. What are the punishments right now? Because I know this is something that you had brought up in some of the information that was released. What are the punishments right now for somebody who is caught poaching?
So the Oregon legislature a couple of years ago increased the penalties from misdemeanors to possibly felony crimes. So depending on the particular species involved and the crime involved, they can be prosecuted as a felony. We had a recent case in Pendleton where somebody who took a number of trophy animals and a number of other animals, I think 13 in total, deer and elk. And he was fined $75,000 for these crimes. And then he also must serve 2 weeks in jail every year during his normal hunting season in that area. So for the next 3 years, he will spend 14 days in jail in the fall. And so these increased penalties allow prosecutors the opportunity to really prosecute these crimes at a higher level for those who have committed really egregious crimes.
Well, for to go back to the campaign here to turn in poachers, and I just want to reiterate. You mentioned that there's the phone number you can call, Star OS, or excuse me, maybe you can just explain what that was again. What's the phone number again?
800-842-7888, or you can go to the website, either Oregon State Police Fish and Wildlife Division, or you can go to the Protect Oregon's Wildlife Turn-In Poachers site. On that site, we have news releases over time that talk about some of the poaching incidents in Oregon. We have some information on how to identify poaching if you come across it out in the field, while you're hiking, while you're fishing, or hiking along Oregon's riverbanks, or while you're along the shorelines. And then we have information on what makes a good witness. How do you know that you're giving fish and wildlife troopers the information that they need to solve the crime?
That's a very good point right there. Probably some good tips and tricks going through that. I mean, along those lines, how do you know if you're being a good, you know, a good person, reporting accurate information, I guess?
Mhm. Well, just report what you know. And so if you see something happening, and you can get, like we said, if you can get a license plate or a vehicle description, the more information that you can give, the better. It's also important to know that people who turn in poachers can remain anonymous. So you don't need to give your name. You don't need to worry about repercussions for doing that. I know there is a definite intimidation factor maybe there for people who decide to make that call, but it's very confidential. It can be made anonymous, and you can qualify for a reward or hunter preference points. And when we talk about the rewards, It's interesting that they're supported through not only the Oregon Hunters Association, but also groups that are against hunting. So this was bipartisan legislation that was passed, and this is something that all Oregonians can get behind. We all, whatever our activities are out in our outdoors, we all can be involved in preserving our natural resources, and we all want to be involved in that.
Absolutely. So I think that's a very good point too, that this is across the board. Everybody wants this to stop. So turning in poachers is just an absolute, something that everybody can do to help out there. Well, Yvonne, anything else that you want to let people know about?
If you see something, say something. Visit us at our new website. And remember, all tips are good tips, and you can remain anonymous.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining us here and providing some education on this, especially for people who may not be aware of how this all works, what to do, what they can do. Now I feel like a lot more people are going to know. So thank you for doing that, and absolutely best of luck on this campaign.
Thank you.
You bet. And thank you to everybody too for joining us here for Fox 12 Now. So again, we start live streaming at 1 p.m. Pacific every weekday. I say Pacific, you're probably in that zone, but who knows where you're watching. So we start live at 1 p.m. We provide coverage throughout the afternoon. If there's breaking news, you can come here and watch us on whatever platform you're watching right now. Coming up at 1:30 p.m., I've got the Serendipity Center who's going to be joining me, nonprofit that provides K through 12 education in therapeutic ways for students to handle some of those things. So that's coming up here at 1:30, so you can join me live for that. As always, you can watch the rest of our programming as well on the Fox 12 Oregon YouTube channel or on the app. There's a button right there that says Fox 12 Now or KPTV.com. Always a great way to go to. So thanks for tuning in. We're going to sign off for right now. I'll be right back at 1:30. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.